Alright, so what we did in the last video is we created the X and O static mesh. In the video before that, we started to do some housekeeping by cleaning out our different classes. So if you remember in our puzzle block class, we've did some deleting of these additional nodes here. What I'm going to do is this VR stuff, I'm just going to move it down. We don't really need it. We're not really going to be fiddling with that. So I'm going to zoom in here. So this is what our puzzle block class essentially looks like. So pause it, look at yours, make sure it looks like it. And remember that our puzzle block class is actually the class that's attached to our blocks that appear when we press play in the game. And then we have our puzzle block grid. And again, down here we have where we kind of talked about how it handles the scoring. We actually don't even need this. So I'm going to select it and delete it. And I'm going to delete this score variable here. It's an integer from our script. And that's in our puzzle block grid. And we are going to be doing some rework on this guy right here. So let me, I'll bore you for a second and kind of explain the for loop, the modulus operator, and divider. Now don't worry if you don't know what a modulus operator is or whatever, which really is just when you divide two numbers. We're looking at the remainder of it. So let's take a quick look at all of this stuff and what it's sort of doing. Our size variable, the number of our blocks that are being produced as it runs through this for loop. So the way this kind of works is you have the X and Y axis. And every time it goes through the loop, it takes the index, sort of like wherever it's at on the array, and it gets the modulus of the size of that array. And then it places it on there. And then it does the same thing for the y-axis. It takes the divisor of our index times the block spacing. So we're going to actually do our own little mathematical formula with 8, and we're going to do that with our last index. So first things first is we already know the size of our block. It's see how its current value is 3. We already know that it's 3. So I'm actually going to delete this. I'm going to delete this X add pin. I'm going to delete this guy right here. And like I said, we do know the size here, so I'm going to delete this. So inside of here, I'm just going to type in 3, like I was saying. And then there's the sort of mathematical formula on how we're going to do this. So in our last index here, we're going to type in an 8, press enter. So it's, actually, you know what, we can type in the whole formula under last index. So it's kind of hard to see, but it's 8, and then in parentheses, it's the word size times size. And then the spacing of the block is -1. And you hit enter on that, and it'll input it in there. You should see an 8 in there. It says the index of the integer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and compile and save that. This is, again, I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit. This is what yours should look like. Let's go back to our puzzle block here, and we're going to go to our event graph. And we're going to tweak this a little bit. Actually, let's jump back here. What we do need is a variable. And we're going to check whether it's the X turn or the Y turn. So the way you create variables is you click here on the plus sign, add one. I'm just going to type the word is X. And on the details panel over here, I want to ensure that it's a Boolean. And then the tooltip is, as you hover over, what is it going to say? Is player 1 is what we're checking with this. Now, the way that you get this variable, let's make it public for one, but the way that we get this variable from our puzzle block class, let's make sure we compile and save, is we use this owning grid. So when I drag this out, it's going to say, do you want to get a variable or do you want to set a variable? We want to get, and what we're trying to get is X. And you can see it says get is X. I'm going to hit yes. So there's our target here. And let's move these over a little bit. I'm going to copy this branching node. Oops, let's try that again. Control C, Control V. And all we're going to do is branch between these two. So we're going to check our, here's our branch. We're going to check our condition. Is it X? Now the next thing we need to do is, again, remember we're on our puzzle block class here. This is our puzzle block. And what I want to do is I want to add an empty game object or a static mesh. And this is going to be my spawn point. So some of you might be familiar with making empty game objects in Unity. This is the same thing. And what I want to do is spawn my X and O on this point here. So just by creating this static mesh, and I'm going to rename this placeholder. And based on this placeholder here, when we go back to our event graph, I'm going to right click and I'm just going to type in static mesh. Let's look for set static mesh. There we go. So this placeholder, as you can see here, is that placeholder that we created right here. This is the reference to it. So what is that? What are we putting on that placeholder, this guy right here? Well, we're going to create we're going to reference two static meshes. So I'm going to copy that with Control C, paste it here, and I'm going to grab this same thing. And my two targets are here's my O static mesh, and then down here I'm going to click on it and I'm going to look for my X static mesh. Here it is. And now I want to check if it's true or false based on which one is clicked. Now that's not working yet. We haven't set that up yet. But let's compile and save this. But as we press play, if we click, we should get player 1, which is the X. All right, I'm going to stop this video here, and then next video we'll take a look at building out the clicks so that when you click it'll do X and Y.